Why do local politics matter? Shouldn't we just look at regional, state, and national races? Well, today I've got Rashanah Baldwin with us. She's the host of What's Good in Englewood, WKKC 89.3. Rashanah, welcome to CounterPoint.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, appreciate you being here. Oftentimes people say, well, I pay federal taxes, I pay state taxes, but sometimes they neglect the fact that they pay local taxes. Half of your property tax bill goes to the schools in your community. The other half of your property tax goes to universities, libraries, goes to paying for public safety. And so often when you ask the question, why do local politics matter? You're an Englewood resident. Why do politics matter in Northwest Indiana, Gary, Hammond, East Chicago, but why do they matter in Chicago, specifically in Englewood?
Because it happens on a local level. It affects me day to day. You talked about education. I see those impacts down on the ground, boots on the grounds. I think that the local politics matter because, again, we see the impact every day from the federal, how they failed us, and it trickles down to the local and what we got to do to really change that and, impact federal.
You mentioned something interesting to me earlier because people outside of Chicago think that there's only one alderman per community.
Yeah.
Maybe two. That's not the case for Englewood?
No, we have currently 5, and I think that's a problem. You talk about the issues, and we hear about all the things that's happening in the community in Englewood and what the problems are. Well, we have 5 people deciding how money's been spent, what's happening with, the sewage, what's happening with crime. So, 5 aldermen is a problem. But
is it hard to establish the Englewood narrative when you have 5 aldermen?
Yes, it's hard to really get that message out that there is good in Englewood, that it is individuals like myself who are law-abiding citizens doing great things in the community. It's even hard to really get residents themselves to see the good in Englewood.
Yeah. Oftentimes when we hear about Englewood in Chicago, I think it's a wonderful neighborhood. I don't have any fear when I drive through Englewood. I used to produce a show from Englewood. But what is the Englewood narrative outside of those like yourself who are trying to spin a positive narrative? What is the narrative for someone who only hears about Englewood?
It's a place of despair. It's a national issue where they look at the community as a place that you wouldn't go, you shouldn't live, you should be fearful. And that's the narrative I'm trying to change because it creates that frenzy all over the country in our communities of color. And that narrative and spreading that fear, that frenzy really has an issue. And you see why we see all this over-policing. You see why this violence happens with the police and even fellow residents, because that negative narrative, they feel hopeless, despair, and then you create that negative story nationally, which, paints that picture of despair.
So the picture of despair is being painted without Englewood, but within Englewood, what type of narrative is being created?
A positive one, a one that's saying that it's individuals like Rashanah Baldwin, is individuals like my pastor, Kevin Andre Brooks, who are civically engaged, who are law-abiding citizens, who are working to really show how great Englewood is, who are viable residents, who are working to improve the quality of life in Englewood. That's what the narrative is.
So I'm going to look at some comparisons and contrasts here. When we look at Northwest Indiana, many times the negative narrative goes toward Hammond, Gary, and East Chicago. Most profoundly, Gary, because of the loss of jobs in the steel mills over a 30-year period. We look at massive unemployment. At a time, there were some infrastructure problems, and the city really never recovered from that because of white flight and because of jobs going elsewhere. In East Chicago, they're having problems with a housing project being built on a contaminated Superfund site, and now they're having problems with lead and they have to relocate the individuals. And so those communities have to look at changing the narrative as well. So how do we get to a point where Rashanah Baldwin, host of What's Good in Englewood, WKKC, and of course your many other titles. You're a beauty queen as well. This is what they told me. What is that title?
Miss American Elegance Woman 2016-2017.
And you have a platform of what?
Civic engagement and raising awareness on domestic violence.
The civic engagement involves what? What type of civic engagement?
Being active in my community, and by that, mentoring. I do a lot of mentoring with the Montessori School of Englewood because I know it's important to give back. I know it's important to really, get in the minds of the youth and really, mentor them, educate them, teach them, give them hope. So many times that they hear the negative stories of Englewood and they would never expect a young lady like myself to be college educated, a beauty queen, and still residing in the Englewood community. So I tell them, it's not about leaving the hood, it's about bringing up the hood. Reach back and give back.
It's so interesting how people want what's best in life, but they're not willing to go through the growing pains.
Absolutely.
There have been some remarkable individuals who have come out of Gary, Indiana,
Yes.
and who have come out of Englewood.
Absolutely.
And many times their stories, they're not told properly.
Exactly.
And so someone like you has to come along, Aisha Butler, and the many others who can change that narrative and say, wait a minute, it's okay to get off the Dan Ryan on the 63rd Street
Absolutely.
and drive west.
Yes.
All right. Understand you have a new grocery store in
Yes.
Englewood.
Whole Foods.
Whole Foods is in Englewood.
That's good
So
in
Whole
Englewood.
Foods wasn't afraid to move to Englewood. How did that come about?
That came about, the late Alderman Joanne Thompson. She was one of the elected officials that I applaud who said, we need this quality grocery store in our community. We talk about the issues, but let's address them. We didn't have quality grocery stores. They wanted to paint this picture of Englewood being a food desert. We had grocery stores, they were subpar. So what about bringing quality? What about, really helping the economy of Englewood by bringing Whole Foods? And they wasn't afraid. Their motto was that we need this store to work. We want to give what the residents have been seeking for so long.
So there's an example of a politician or a local government doing the
Absolutely.
right thing
Absolutely.
by trying to eradicate a food desert
Yes.
and bring in some fresh produce and some fresh
Absolutely,
products.
and that's why local politics matter. It affects us on a day-to-day basis. This is something that's touchable, attainable. You can actually go up to your local alderman and say something and say, what can we do to address these disparities in our community? What can we do to change that narrative by bringing a quality grocery store, by bringing jobs also? And then from that Whole Foods, there's also other stores, a Starbucks, a Chipotle, that's really stimulating the economy of Englewood to really change that narrative that I really work so hard to put out to the mass media and my fellow Englewoodians. There's good in this community. Don't leave.
Rashanah Baldwin, thanks for being on CounterPoint. She's a beauty queen, she's a host, she's a civic engagement activist, she's all that and more. Rashanah Baldwin, we want to thank you for being on CounterPoint. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
All right. Tweet me, post on Instagram, or send me a message on Facebook. Let's start the conversation. Your voice is important on CounterPoint.